Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reasonably Fine Art Talk. This is your friend Charlie Hunter in Bellows Falls, Vermont. Behind the scenes down there in Austin, Texas, is Miss Betty Sue, who managed to dodge speeding Ted Cruz last week and did not lose her power and did not lose her water. She did have to boil the water. But anyway, Betty Sue is back there and with us today. Very, very special guest, one of my favorite watercolorists, very, very distinctive style, and a very distinctive watercolor style and a very distinctive personal style. Our good friend from Chicago, Illinois, Mr. Mat Barber Kennedy. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Hello, Charlie.
So where are you today in this commodious background with drawings behind you?
Commodious. I didn't expect commode to come into a conversation so early. This is I'm in the photography studio at the American Academy of Art here in Chicago on Michigan Avenue, which is where I pass my time 4 days of the week, 8 months of the year, and have done for, I don't know, I think about 15 years. I've been teaching here at the American Academy of Art. I've taught life drawing. I've taught, I currently teach the art of business, the business of art. That's not the title of the course. And I teach painting.
And painting, okay.
Mostly.
And you, I know that part of what has helped evolve your distinctive style is you did do extensive amount of commercial illustration for a while, did you not?
Well, yes and no. I'd love to say I did extensive amounts of illustration. I've done some illustration, and I think, but that's more recent.
Really? Okay.
Architecture is where I really learned to do what I do. So I have a undergrad and a postgrad in architecture.
Really? I did not know that.
I'm like an onion. I'm like an onion, Charlie.
I first met you a few years ago at Door County Plein Air, which you have done. How many years? You've done that for a number of years.
A long time. That was my first ever plein air event when I didn't know what a plein air event was. So I think I've done that for more than a dozen years. I've been doing that for a while.
Right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what a plein air event is, it's a fundraiser for an arts organization, and we're the entertainment. Some are juried, some are invitational, some are open. I believe Door County is invitational.
Invitational, yeah.
And so the Peninsula School of Art invites 20 artists to come up. We get put up for a week, and we go around and paint whatever the hell we want most days. Occasionally we have to paint somewhere specifically. And then there's a gala and judging, and they get their patrons all liquored up, and hopefully the patrons buy paintings. And it's great fun for us because we get to paint. We get to paint all day, every day, and then hang out in the evening and like sample the local cuisine and the local beers and stuff. It's great.
It is great, and even without the local cuisine, it has become a major part of my business. It's become a major part of how I organize my year.
How many events do you do a year now?
Right. So some people do a lot of these things. I don't. Number one, I'm tied to the semester structure. So I'm in Chicago 8 months of the year. A good year for me is 6 great top-notch events. I think we're all trying to get into ever better and better events, whatever better means. It means different things for different people. But for me, if I can do one a month throughout the 4 months of the summer, and I can squeak one in during the fall semester, the school are very good to support me in this. So Texas or Cape Ann. 1 year they let me do both. And then I can do one in the spring semester. And that's typically, I think, been Annapolis. And so 6 is as many as I can do. I'm a family man, and so I can't do back-to-backs and be gone from Sherry and the boys. That doesn't work with my other commitments. And I'm a teacher, and that does it does mean I have to be here.
It does set some parameters, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, part of why I enjoy doing the plein air events is that it forces me to paint constantly for 5 days in a row or 2 weeks in a row. And if I'm working in the studio, I'm not going to be that disciplined. I'm not going to be putting in 8 hours of close visual, staring matches. Because that's the other thing about the skill set for doing a plein air is you've got to be able to look at reality, filter it through how one puts brush to surface, and deliver the goods day after day.
That is something that I bang on about here at the Academy all the time, and it's something that I take for granted, because you go out there in the big wide world, and number one, it's huge, it's endless, it's infinite, and you have to find your painting.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I think there was going to be a list there, and I lost my train after one. Terrible list, but I talk about that a lot. I mean, you sit in front of a thing, a still life, a human.
Mm-hmm.
You've still got to find an idea. You've still got to find your painting and create your gateway in, your interest. Otherwise, it's a technical exercise, and nobody got time for that. And so I think with plein air, there's a tremendous rigor and exercise of the intellect to try and filter out from all of this stuff something that is special and that you can grab a hold of, put down, and that is going to capture an audience.
And I think that's an excellent lead in to start looking at some of the work. Now, we start with stuff that is studio work, but we will get into some plein air stuff later. So, Betty Sue, could you toss one of the? Let's start out with this one. What in the world is this, Matt?
What? This is something I'm working on in my garage at the moment. It's almost finished.
Ladies and gentlemen, this looks nothing like Matt's plein air work.
No. So, as I mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned it earlier, I was an architect. I wasn't an architect for very long. I was only an architect for 15 months, but I studied architecture for 7 years, and I learned a lot about my paintings, or what I bring to painting. I learned that by looking at and producing and designing architecture, and I still do it to this day. Although I don't build much, I don't build anything except personal projects for me and Sherry. But this is something that is a theme of what I have going on in my head all the time, and I produce a lot, which is influenced obviously by architecture and engineering and design. But there are bits of whimsy and stupidity in here, and happenstance and randomness, that are the things that I'm sort of looking for in the architecture that I paint. The impure, the self-conscious architecture of barns and whatever. That's what's going on here in this kind of machine tractor, steam powered, wind powered thing city.
Right, and you do a lot of that. You have like the television set with the hand crank, and but this is it pen?
So this is all in. This is all pencil. One pencil. I have used the same pencil for years and years and years and years, and it's a mechanical pencil.
But that's good, because otherwise it would be pretty.
There'd be a lot of pencil sharpening going on up there in the sky. It's a mechanical pencil, but it's a 0.3 millimeter, which is finer than your average Joe. And this particular one is the one that I love. I love the weight of it. I love the expression of it. and a 0.3 lead gives me a really fine line. So I use this for my technical drawing, but I use it for everything that I do out in the field and in the studio. It's the only pencil I use.
How big is this piece?
This is a big bad boy. This is about 36 by 28.
Okay, so now here's the question I'm sure everybody out there in internet land is wondering. How in the world do you keep from smudging?
Okay, and this is painted. This is not painted. This is drawn on vellum. It's drawn on both sides of the vellum. So there's some parts of this are on the back. Mostly the shading is done on the back, so I'm not smudging it with my hand. And then the line work is done on the front, which also adds to the visual quality of it in ways that are so subtle you can't really see them, but they're there, and it does separate the tone from the line. So it's drawn on both sides, and I do paintings like that too. Carry on. Let's
jump in on that just to clarify that the vellum that we are talking about is not traditional vellum. It is not lamb skin, cured and stretched. It is architectural vellum, which is a translucent plastic paper with a surface that accepts graphite beautifully.
Super smooth, yeah. If you draw on tracing paper, it's got more tooth to it, and your graphite wears down more quickly. You don't get such a fine line. It's more aggressive as a paper. This is super smooth, as you say, plasticky. If you're a painter and you've ever painted on Yupo, this is much more like that surface, but it is translucent, and so you can use both. And Edward Wedler has just asked if I ever use ink on vellum. And yes, as an architect back in the day, because when I was an architect, computer aided design was only just beginning to break in. I never practiced in that way. So all my architectural drawings from back in the day, in the 80s and 1990, I stopped being an architect, were all ink on vellum and ink on tracing paper.
Well, let's go on to the next one, just because we have so many things. This is also recent, right?
So this I did last semester. A lot of what I do here in the studio to sort of in the classroom, rather, to illustrate a principle. So in this particular case, I was using a mapping pen, a dipping pen in water-soluble ink. The water-soluble is not being demonstrated here because I haven't activated it, but I was using a different kind of pen, a mapping pen, dipping it in ink and showing line work to build up, to create tone. A lot of the students here, vast preponderance of the students here at the American Academy are are headed towards a career in illustration. So this is me putting together an image and executing in pen and ink. And I'm hopefully talking about draftsmanship, talking about knowing what it is that you're drawing, knowing how things go, learning the shapes of things. So this is this, as was the last one, totally out of my head. This is just drawing from what I know after years of looking at aeroplane wheels, looking at boats, looking at shacks and sheds and the world. So that's what this is, and this may have existed nowhere but in room 264, were it not for the marvelous world of Instagram, social media. So they have a presence, but I would not send this to a gallery. This isn't typical of the work I send to galleries. This is much more my illustration work, and from things like this, I would pick up illustration commissions, which is a tiny part of what I do. I don't do very much illustration.
But one thing I would point out, and I would urge people to be looking at as you look at Matt's work, is note how Matt plays with the proportions and how we view things. It's in the foreground. Actually, this actually reminds me of the illustrator and cartoonist Gahan Wilson. In that Gahan Wilson, do you know? Well, anyway, but
I'll look him up.
There was similar distortion of of objects. Now, and that is something that is part of your real distinctive plein air work.
Absolutely.
Talk to us a little, or maybe when we get to the plein air work, let's talk about it a little bit more. This is imagination. And again, what size is this one?
So this is a 11 by 14.
Okay.
That's on watercolor paper on arches. And were I to do anything more with it, I would turn this into what we refer to as a wash drawing. This is in water-soluble ink. And so by applying water, that then becomes activated, and the more ink you have, the darker the wash. And so this is a very traditional technique that predates watercolor, in fact, and is much more akin to the hatching techniques that we associate with engraving. But wash drawing is a very simple way of turning a drawing into a painting. And I teach that here at the Academy as a piece of language. And I think a lot of people really are, A, unfamiliar with it, and B, like it.
Right. Now, it's a quick question then, before, even though we do have to keep moving on, but I would think that students nowadays would have pretty much grown up in the digital domain.
Yeah.
So are they eager to learn? My dad was a printer, right? And my dad loved offset printing because he had grown up with letterpress. And to him, you did not want you did not want the impression of type in the paper. That was a no-no. Then once offset became dominant, all of a sudden letterpress becomes
gone
again, and people think it's gone as a commercial thing, but as an artisanal. And people love seeing that type smashed into the paper. So do these digital kids enjoy the tactility of pen and ink?
I would have to say they do, but also drawing is drawing. You can buy the biggest iPad in the world and the most wonderful pencil. You still got to use it. Right. So drawing and learning about tone and value. The Academy, we're really, really, really strong on learn your foundational principles and get them right before you start mucking about. So we do have a vast amount of illustrators who really do work digitally for most of their work. Still, they would take a watercolor semester because you're going to learn about value. You're going to learn about seeing value. You're going to learn about the importance of value and line, and then you bring that to your digital work. Technology is a wonderful thing, but you still need to know what you're talking about. Right. So I do very little work digitally myself, very little. But learning to draw certainly helps you break into the digital world. If you don't have good drawing skills, you're shot.
Right. Well, and I do a lot of projection on my larger paintings, and I allow myself to do that because I also have a very vigorous daily sketching practice.
Yes, you do.
From life.
Yeah.
And if I was just doing projections, I think the stuff would flatten out.
Right.
But anyway, let's move on to the art.
We'll move on to the art stuff. But as we do so, I'm just going to affirm you, Charlie. You do draw, and one of the reasons why I think I love your work, and one of the reasons why, for various reasons, I think you and I sometimes get put into the same bracket, is that drawing is a strong element in our work. Let's just, I can claim that for myself. I think I'm a better drawer than I am a painter. I think we have an affinity for drawing. Of course, I'm speaking for you there, which I have no right to do. But
no, that was my undergraduate art education was the foundation of it was drawing.
Yeah.
We had 3 years of life drawing from 8 a.m. till noon, 3 days a week, and just that you get what gets drilled into you. So tell us about this one, Matt.
All right, so this is I think called Notionally Paris. So this, much like those first two pieces that you showed, this is from in my filing cabinet in my head. I know Paris. I've been there enough. I've drawn it enough. I've painted it enough. I've looked at it enough. I've looked at architecture. I've looked at how paint stains. I've looked at how posters peel. And the more you know about your subject, the more you can just do it. So this is not anywhere real, but to me, it's sort of quintessentially Parisian. And this, again, I did here at the Academy as a demonstration for students involved in a project, and they're working on that very project 5 doors down the corridor right now, which is using matte medium as an additive to watercolor. For the longest time, my paintings involved collage, and this involves collage, but I never wanted it to be about collage. I never thought of myself as a collage artist. I just use collage to create a thickness and a layering, because that's what architecture is. It's this piecing together of components. So I've pretty much always used collage. I don't do it plein air very often because you get grit in the glue. I did a quick paint. You know what the quick paint's like. It's like, don't talk to me. But to make it even harder for myself, I did a collage quick paint one year, and it was windy, and there was grit flying and getting stuck in everything. But yeah, collage is part of what I do. It's not part of who I am. I don't think people look at my work and think he's a collage painter.
Right.
I'm so repetitive. I just said that 4 times.
Well, it's good to just set those parameters. So again, tell us the scale of this.
So this is right over here. I'm going to guess this is 6 inches by 25 inches, let's say.
Okay.
So there's a sheet of paper with some different demos on. These are direct painting of balls of string. So a lot of the stuff I do in here doesn't even end up on its own, doesn't even get its own piece of paper. It doesn't even have the dignity of its own piece of paper. Anyway, so that's how big that is. And this is matte medium. Okay,
so now is it painting on the matte medium, or is it applying the matte medium on top of the watercolor?
Yes, and yes. So in my demos, I try to show all the different ways that I can think of to use it. So there's matte medium put down and then paint on the top. There's matte medium mixed into, or paint mixed into matte medium and painted on. There's matte medium as a glue. There's matte medium as a glaze, and then more paint put on the top of that. There's 5 different layers of matte medium in there.
Ladies and gentlemen who may not be quite sure what matte medium is, it's basically acrylic paint, slightly runnier than acrylic paint out of the tube, but it's acrylic paint without any pigment in it.
Right. So it functions as an extender. It functions to change the surface, and this isn't a lecture on particular paint technique right now, but it functions to change the surface. You're not painting on watercolor paper anymore. You're painting on something plastic. Totally different ball game. And it opens up a whole new corridor of painting, and that's what my 202 class are doing right now as we speak.
And so there's also gloss medium, which is too slick to really paint on. But matte medium is I use it a lot. If I'm doing a projection, I will very often do my pencil drawing and then put matte medium down on top of it, so I can really wail on the surface. And I still have got it's
all there sealed in. Your drawing's behind that, and you're not going to smudge it or erase it, and then you just obliterate it as you build up your paint. Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one. And Edward is wondering, what got you migrating to your grunge style?
That's interesting. That's a very interesting question. I never began a grunge style. That's who I am. It's how I do the dishes. It's how I decorate my house. It's what I listen to. It's for me, and I don't want to speak for you, Charlie, but as a teacher, I'm constantly confronted with students who are at the beginnings of their career, and there is a sort of a hunger to find your style. And to me, style is so much more than just a shirt that you put on. It's the everything, and this is kind of something I truly believe. Good painting comes from here, and it's from inside, and I just am grunge style. I that's just who I am.
So let's talk about this. Is more in the vocabulary of how I think of your work.
Of course.
Talk to us about this size,
Right.
what's on, all that kind of stuff.
So this is a 12 by 12, and this is familiar to you and more like what you're used to seeing, because this is me doing something observational. So this is painted on gesso. Everything that Charlie has seen of mine for the last 5 years has been on gesso. I seldom work on watercolor paper in my studio practice and in my plein air work.
And why is that?
So my application techniques are best suited to something that's very, very substantial. Watercolor paper would have to be 300-pound watercolor paper to withstand the hammering that I like to give it.
Yes. Right.
I like to gouge into it. I like to squeeze the paint straight out of the tube. In this case, I'm starting by squeezing the paint straight out of the tube, almost painting like an oil painter. A lot of retraction. I put a lot of paint down and then I take it off.
With what? What are your?
So because I'm working with water-based media, I mean, I can wet it and wipe it off. I can wet it and brush it off. I can wet it and cut into it with a knife. I don't, but I could wet it with a sponge and take off large portions. I don't do that, but so I'm using water-based media on a ground that does not absorb too much of the paint. So it sits there, in this case on gesso, which is what is my favored substrate. Acrylic gesso.
And what brand? Because as I get gessos are all over the place.
They are absolutely all over the place, and I have my well, I've got my number one really. My number one is made by a company called Art Boards, and it's very hard to find. It's very hard to get hold of. You just go and buy it online. And Blicky used to carry it, but don't anymore. Art Boards, ARTBOARDS. Terrible name for a company, but well, they make art boards, I guess. So, but their gesso is called Art Boards Gesso. It is the best gesso for what I do. So when people ask me what gesso I use, I don't muck about trying all different things. Just go buy that one. So I also do use rabbit skin glue gesso in the studio on large pieces where I make my own gesso on a double boiler. And that one I use the Gamblin mixture. You can buy a pre-mixed set of powder. It's got the rabbit skin glue all mixed in. You just add boiling water and cook it over the stove. But I only do that in the studio because it's not conducive to plein air work. And I only do that on large pieces. But the Art Boards gesso, acrylic gesso, put it on with a trowel or a brush. I personally am a trowel guy, and you're good to go. And then paint straight out of the tube. But to your earlier question, Charlie, this looks like a plein air piece because this is what I do plein air, which is sit in front of something and capture it. It just happens to be indoors, but that's my oil can, which I paid $4 for. You can see.
I can see, or at least you've doctored the image to make it clear that you paid $4 for it. So do you ever work with gouache?
I have white gouache. It's not. If you see white in my work, it's usually the white of the substrate. I do use white acrylic ink, which I apply with a mapping pen as a drawing tool. I do that quite frequently, and in fact, if you look at the bottom corner of my oil can, that's white acrylic ink, which is non-water soluble, mixed into a water soluble wash so that it does crackly things because it's non-miscible. The number of times I use my white gouache in a year is, you can count on one hand.
So you like the universe of transparent color.
Absolutely, and I don't have anything against gouache. It's too dead in my for my taste. So I work on if I work on paper, I work on hot press paper because it's bright and hard and shiny, because I have a very graphic, edgy style, and I don't want diffuse. So cold press paper has a diffuse surface that diffuses the light bouncing off of it, softens the edges a little. Gouache is opaque and a little deader. I don't mean that to denigrate gouache. I'm just saying it's the quality of translucent watercolor, the crisp pizzazz of it. Although I paint paintings that are turgid, that's where I find that quality. It's the brightness that you get from what's underneath shining through the watercolor.
Right now we did have a question, which goes back to the matte medium question.
Yes.
I wouldn't think. Eugenia is asking, does the matte medium affect how the camera picks up the image quality of the artwork when you're documenting it? It doesn't really, does it?
The only way it does, it is actually a good question. It does affect the image if you have substantial body, because now you're creating ridges. And if you take a bad photograph of a very, very impasto oil painting, you actually have shadow shapes from the thickness of the brushstrokes. So it can do, if you start to build in ridges that are of a sufficient height and you photograph it with a light that is not well adjusted, you can get shadow shapes. But because I don't use gloss medium, it doesn't give me reflection. So basically I don't want it to be there. And if can you use matte medium? Like some watercolors are using wax to preserve a watercolor. Well, actually, I use wax to preserve a watercolor sometimes, if I was doing that at the weekend. So I don't like for the surface of the painting to be apparent. I don't want it to be about, I don't want you to see this thing. So that's another reason I don't use gloss.
Right, because it's not about the painterly qualities of the paint. It's about the application of the paint, and it's about the subject.
Absolutely. So these paintings are not typically framed under glass, and they are finished in one of two ways. I do use a wax finish, 3 coats of wax applied with a steel wool, which is beautiful and really starts to build up a soft surface that you're kind of looking through. But more traditionally, or more typically, I use Krylon archival matte varnish, which is UV protection for the painting, just like UV glass. And I don't use UV glass because I don't like seeing it. UV glass is horrible in my view. So it's a purely invisible spray of UV protection, and then you can dust the thing. You're not going to wipe the material off. If you don't do anything to finish it, then yes, you have a very fugitive painting, which if anyone were to spit on it, it could be wiped clean. Right. So you do have to do something.
Next, let's look at the next one. This is where it gets. Is this Cape Ann?
This is Cape Ann. This is I was thrilled to find this. I'm always thrilled to find something that is unself-conscious, or is kind of simple and humble, and not too. You see this kind of thing on the high street, and it's usually a cafe or a restaurant, and it's been done with a view to capture people's attention and have them come and buy a cup of coffee or a cheese sandwich. But when you find it and it's by the coast and it belongs to someone and has done for a while, it's always so lovely. So yeah, this is in Cape Ann.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, here, this is part of what makes Matt's stuff so distinctive. Look at how the viewer is part of this painting, in that there's distortion that emphasizes the viewer's point of view. Talk about that. Yeah. Why do you distort? Is that to draw the viewer in?
It's because that's what it looks like. We learn to do perspective. In fact, I wish everybody could learn to do perspective well. I think it's important to do perspective well. It's not how we see, though. It's just an abstraction. It's a system that we've agreed on for about 400 years in the West.
Right.
But it's not what the world looks like. It can't be. it just can't be. Things can't go to a vanishing point over there and a vanishing point over there, because if they did, every building we looked at would have a point in the middle. Things are gently bending. You know it, but you also, it seems odd to some people. I can't not draw like this.
Right.
I've been doing it for so long. But also beyond that is really how it seems. Everything is bending. It's infinite point perspective. Beyond that, there's also the imperfection that I love, that I'm trying to celebrate. The imperfection of the humble, which I think politically, Charlie, you would probably agree with. There's something quite marvelous about the unassuming ordinariness of the everyday. And these are not fabulous materials. They're dinted and dented and worn by time. And if ever they were perfect, they're not now. They've been hit by too many rainfalls, and that's what makes these things so beautiful. And it's not a nostalgic thing at all for me. It's not like, oh, I love old stuff because back in the day it was. I love old stuff now because it's been smacked around for years and years and years, and there it is. Look,
Right.
Which is why getting old is not so bad, because my wrinkled face is hopefully evidence that I've smiled a lot and looked a lot.
Yeah, that's the way to look at it. Two things.
Yeah.
Before we answer look at Eugenia's question, which was about fixing it enough so it doesn't bleed with the varnish or matte gel.
Yeah.
So answer that, and then there's stuff I want to point out to the viewer about this.
Okay. So yes, when you're putting down matte medium on top of paint, if you're painting on watercolor, it can be pretty stable. But if you're putting matte medium on paint on matte medium, it's so fugitive. You have to be real careful, and you have to put it on real quick, real smooth, one brush, and you're done. One way to give yourself a little bit more workability is to spray fix. But I'm very cautious about sealing anything into my painting that's going to discolor over time. So UV and archival materials always. If you're thinking about work that's going to get into a frame and you're going to ask someone to give you some money for it, you just have to start thinking about what's this going to look like 10 years from now. Right. So but you have to be very ginger. If you're not fixing, then when you put down your thing, there's no working that matte medium. It's got to go down and leave it alone.
Okay, now what size is this? Is this like a 9x12?
No, this is big. This is big. This is a full sheet painting. So what's that? That's about I don't know how big a full sheet is. I've been painting on bits of paper for quite a while, because I bought a roll of paper early in my career and have just been cutting off bits of paper, whatever size I need them. I'm not actually familiar with what I teach, which is for everyone to go to the store and buy sheets of paper. This is painted on a full sheet.
Okay.
So if you're a painter, you know how big a full sheet is. That's how big this is.
Right. I've just started messing around with watercolor, and so I don't have it memorized yet.
Yeah. Stop now. You're done. Move on. Go back to the oils.
So let's look at this, though. Part of what I think is so fascinating about Matt's visual language is that he'll do something like put the doorway smack dab in the center. So, and it's this flat plane right in front of the viewer, which you're not supposed to do. But look at how he breaks it up. Look at the vertical posts, the beams on the left and right side. One side is greatly detailed with it looks with the dry brush and brushing of the pigment, and then on the other side he just leaves the substrate. So even though it is symmetrical, it is asymmetrical in its application. Similarly, the roof line, that beautiful copper line, coming within a hair of the top of the paint. That's wonderful. That's so gutsy. Love it.
Thank you. Not to spout tried and true cliches, but you do have to know the rules before you can break them. And I do feel that with perspective, I know it well enough to have an opinion about it and to use it in a certain kind of way. But also, I mean, yeah, putting something in the middle, never do that.
Right.
So you do it, and then you AB. I talk to my students about AB language quite often. You do something and then you set something against it.
Right.
You do something in detail, you leave something off. You put something on the right that is balanced by something on the left. The empty space on the left would not work without that white and red buoy and its strong shadow. It's probably the strongest shadow on the whole painting. So you have visual weight kind of working differently left and right, so that it's a dance, it's nothing to do with architecture. It's to do with composition. It could be a painting of a bowl of flowers or a dog. It's composition and getting the eye to dance.
Yes, exactly. But it needs the even though what we are doing are abstract paintings nominally there's a nominal subject matter. It's still, the nominal subject matter has to resonate enough with the creator for us to care about the story we're telling.
Absolutely.
I've got friends who are floral painters. I have zero interest in florals. They love doing florals, and they would find this like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. You just got to find the thing that you've got something to say about.
Yep. I can't talk too much about this, but I have just finished 10 days during the National Watercolor Society show. And I consequently have looked at a lot of people's obsessions. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, whether you're painting a bowl of flowers or a dog, or a child on a bicycle, good drawing is good drawing. Understanding composition, understanding value, understanding color. These are, that's what makes painting.
Right.
And it takes study, and it takes time, and it takes deliberateness.
And it takes doing 19 bad paintings for every good one. So everybody out there in internet land, don't be afraid if your paintings suck. It's part of putting in the hours. Next slide, Betty Sue. This is Door County.
It is Door County. You were probably with me, not actually the day I did it, but the time that was exhibited. Yeah.
Yeah. So look again, ladies and gentlemen, look at everything that he leaves out.
I've managed to make a living selling bits of blank canvas. Really, there's little bits of paint separating the blank canvas. So I'll just tell you, because I know that you have a similar interest in you put your foot on the pedal and you leave your foot off the pedal, and that rhythm of when to say yes and when to say nothing at all. People have asked me again and again, where did that come from? And for me, it's graphics. For me, it comes down to the graphics of the Bauhaus, German period Bauhaus in the 30s. There's just this game with a rectangle. If you look at De Stijl architecture, this Mondrian paintings, the idea of carving up a rectangle to create design. My painting style, my composition style, is drawing on my love of certain kinds of graphic design and certain kinds of geometry. Although the surfaces that I'm dealing with are completely anathema to the principles of De Stijl, right. But that's where a lot of that comes from.
Well, that's fun. That's interesting to me, because that is my graphic design training, was by people who came out of the Bauhaus, and it was a lot of ruling pens and grids and moving dots around on grids and But
interesting.
Now look at this again, ladies and gentlemen. Look at how, and this to me is like music, in that if let's just say we're going left to right, that you start out with the secondary structure, And notice how the value at the beginning of the journey across the surface, the value is very light. Then it gets very dark, and then that first ancillary building goes away, and it cuts down that thin passage of the green, but there's also the wires connecting that small building to the larger barn. Then it gets into kind of the swelling second act, which is the main structure of the main barn, that huge, that vertical, the triangle, and then into the third structure, which echoes the first structure. The roof, you'll note, is handled very similarly, but yet you are losing the edge on the top of the roof.
Yeah,
the edge of the shadow of the gutter, the drain, the eave is very, very definite. And then you've also got the kind of the same language for the gas tank in the center, the propane tank in the center of the main barn, as you are using for the silo to the right. Now, my recollection of that silo is that actually it's quite a bit in real life. It's bigger than that, or unless we're thinking of a different barn.
No, it's. I think you know the barn. It may have been shrunk a little tiny bit so that it didn't dominate. I may have done that. I remember once you and I were in Texas, and there was a question at the lecture at the museum, and someone said, because we've been banging on about this kind of stuff in this kind of way, about these paintings that were being discussed, and we've been talking about this. You do this, you do that, and someone just put their hand up and said, "But you're not really thinking about all that, are you?" And we are thinking about all of that, but it's at a level which that's what makes us get out of the car, because right. This is going to work. It's not it's at the initial seeing level. That's how you see a painting,
right?
And then you get into doing it,
right? And that really comes from doing it a lot. You can't just think the abstract design thoughts. That would be horrible and constrictive and make you feel like an awful human being. But when you're thinking about it, but you're not consciously thinking about it, but you're taking it all into account. That's what it's unself-consciousness about design, I suppose.
Exactly, and no one's born with that. Right. You have to drink it in. You have to look at paintings, and you have to do paintings. You have to look at design and think about design. You have to work out why something works. You have to work out why does that look so cut out and static against that white sky. Well, it's because it's overstated all the way around all of the edges equally, and so it's stuck in the paper. You have to see how things bleed and see how there's rhythm, and you only get that by studying, looking, and thinking and doing. It's one of the reasons why I love to teach. I mean, when you teach, you have to talk a lot about why someone's painting is rubbish or good. And in so doing, you find yourself teaching yourself about, oh, actually, that is why it's rubbish or good, right?
Right. Now, one thing I wanted to say is one of the things I tell people to do is to look at British railway poster design of the first half of the 20th century, because that is simplified down to the big shapes. I mean, very graphic, obviously, but a way of translating the landscape. And one of the things, it's interesting to me, Door County seems to me to have been one of the more adventurous plein air events in inviting people who use a language that is slightly different from the norm of plein air. You and Char, and there are a bunch of people who are not quite doing the traditional pretty picture.
Well, to your earlier point, when you were talking about what a plein air event is, it's usually sponsored by a school, and the Peninsula School of Art are steeped in helping people to make art rather than learn a technique, and so they have a tremendous. We're plugging Peninsula School of Art here. They have a tremendous curriculum of workshops, pushing into all sorts of three-dimensional and abstracted work, And so yeah, of course they're interested in having people come up and make abstracted work
Yeah.
in their plein air event.
Oh,
Like,
Dan, I have right in somewhere in this office is the new catalog from that I just
really? Which you could have held up.
I could have, yeah, I was
Yeah.
hoping, but
I
yeah.
will be teaching up there this summer. I believe in the August. I think I teach there. I taught there before. That's how I found out about plein air events, because I taught there one summer, and they said, "Hey, we're having a plein air event. Would you like to take part? Would you like to come and be part of it?" And I said, "I have no idea what a plein air event is, but sign me up." And it turned out it was what I've been doing all my career, is called plein air painting. I didn't really realize that. I just thought that's how you painted. You went
Right.
and you looked at something and painted it. But that's
the next one, because we're going so long today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for sticking with us. But yeah, what I did here is we just have the last three, and this shows a little bit about your process. So here you are. I believe this is Cape Ann again.
No, this is Annapolis.
This is
Annapolis. This was the last event I actually did. It was last September. They went ahead and had an event.
And how was it?
Fantastic. It's Annapolis. Lovely. So much to paint. A people. I do well there. I have a gallery there, Joe Fleming Contemporary, and it's a well-run event with my kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so this is you getting going on a piece.
Yeah.
You have done a preliminary sketch in a sketchbook before you get to this. Okay.
Yeah. So a scrap of piece of cardboard or something. I used to, and sometimes still do, keep those bits of cardboard. And when someone buys the painting at the show, I'll give them that as a nice little thing stuck on the back of the painting. Yeah, you gotta know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing,
now, this would drive me nuts. The blue of that paper, of the tape, on my white surface. I mean, you've got such a strong design right there before you've applied any pigment. How does that not drive you crazy?
So for me, this is it's only in this state for 15 minutes as I'm doing it. I'm drawing. This is me drawing. So I don't think I actually used my pencil once at Annapolis in a week.
You're drawing with the tape.
I'm drawing with the tape. Okay. So I am using masking tape to mask. This is something that I don't know if anybody else in the world does it, but now this is pretty much how I start most of my plein air work. Actually, some of my studio work as well. It's drawing edges, it's finding edges, many of which are too straight for my taste. So I very often tear the paper down the middle and then use the torn edge to create the edge that I'm drawing. But I'll draw my composition, and if that looks right to me, I'm ready to go. And if I want to adjust it, I pull the tape off and move it half an inch, and then I'm ready to go. But
that's interesting. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So I barely own an eraser. When I need an eraser in the classroom, I walk around the classroom and say, "Does anyone have some needed eraser? Can I borrow a tiny bit?" I don't think I even have one in the classroom. I don't like to draw wrong, and I don't like to try and draw right either. I mean, for me, drawing is part of my language. If I'm going to draw a line, it's because it wants to be there as a line. So this is a great way of setting up my basic shapes, and I haven't put down stuff that I don't mean, and I don't have to erase stuff, which drives me nuts. That's a waste of time. So I design and then I lay it out.
Okay, so let's go on to the next slide.
Boom. So now we're probably, and I'm not a fast painter. Charlie knows this. I'm not.
Right.
So I'm probably an hour in here, and I've got some paint down, and I have masked. You'll see in the background my subject matter. There's a telegraph pole, and that in fact really is the subject of my entire painting. You'll come to see at the end, but I've set it down in masking tape so that I can lay down my shadow shape in the space between those buildings, and then when I take off my masking tape, boom, I've got white underneath to start painting my telegraph pole. It's it's pretty basic science, but I don't know anybody else who works quite like this.
Right.
But I do.
Right, and it's it's finding the language, the language that works for you. That's
Right.
Now, one thing that you're not afraid to do is radically change the values, which I
Right.
find very hard to do. I mean, you've got basically the same values for the pink building as the subject matter, but
Yep.
the dusky blue building on the right, you're doing that much lighter value.
Yeah. I try to reserve my darkest darks for a few punchy places where I really mean it. And I'm not a view painter. I don't think of myself as a view painter, although a lot of my paintings are views. But I'm making a painting, and I'm flattening my view. This is actually this is a jaunty angle for me. I would normally choose to look straight at this thing. Values for me are both a weakness and a tool. It's not my strong suit. I want to get better at value, but I don't want to be. I'm certainly not a tonalist. I would like to push a little bit more with my values, but I definitely refine my brightest brights and my darkest darks for design elements rather than to capture the world at that particular time of day. For example, plein air painting. Oh, it's all about capturing the time of day. It's not for me. I'm there 8 hours. It's not about capturing the time of day. It's about capturing other things. And at some point, I'm going to say, okay, this is where the shadows are. Boom.
Right.
And that's for a design, purely for a design, the best design bang for my buck. This is the best angle for shadows. Now's where I'm going to put them in. So I'm not I love the way you've caught that morning light kind of plein air painter.
Right. No, you're not.
I'm not.
And let's go to the next one. This is the finished piece.
Pretty much finished. I can't remember if I did any more on it when I got home, but if at some point one has to pack up and leave, that's the thing about plein air painting. You tend not to be working on something for an extended period of time. 8, 9, 10 hours is as long as I usually spend on a plein air painting. But I will back in the studio. Usually I'll sleep on it, wake up the next morning, and before it's gotten too light and I feel like I'm missing the next day, I'll review and I'll say, well, I got to push that edge. I got to tidy this up. I got to maybe brighten something here. So those are things. Then I don't need to see the paint, the subject matter. I'm looking at the painting. What does the painting need? And I'm marvelously liberated because I don't have to make it look like what's in front of me, because it's not in front of me anymore. I'm back at the hotel or my guest house. I'm now just looking at a painting. What do I need to do to tweak this?
So now is the sky, is that masked off between the sky and the roof lines?
The roof line is masked, yes. So I can't remember if you go back to 2 slides, don't do it. But yes, that the roof line is protected so that I can lay that sky in with gay abandon and really get some energy in there
Right.
and not worry about splashing blue all over the place.
Right. All right. Well, so that, ladies and gentlemen, is a quick overview of what Mat Barber Kennedy's oeuvre looks like.
Yeah, that's what my oeuvre looks like. Absolutely. That's what my doctor said.
We nearly just saw what Charbonneau's oeuvre looked like.
I think we got a good view of that.
We did. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Now, so if people want to learn more about you, it's Mat Barber Kennedy Studio. What is the
MatBarberKennedy.com. 1 T in Matt. Never saw the point in the second T. Waste of time.
See, that's the essence of what Matt is all about, ladies and gentlemen. Getting to the sinew and bone of the
yeah.
Anyways, Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Charlie, it was lovely to be with you again. I miss our times together.
Well, there'll be more. So hopefully, Door County will happen this year. And take good care, and we'll see. I have a full view of Charbonneau's oeuvre right now.
There's the oeuvre. Yep.
Thanks so much, and thank you all out there in internet land for watching, and thank you, Betty Sue, for pulling the strings behind the scenes. Take good care, everybody. Bye-bye.